It was morning handover, and I'd come on as part of the day team. And I came on to what I imagined was going to be quite a nice shift. I was quite a junior registrar at the time. I had an ST6 who was 2 months away from being a consultant on with me. My clinical director was going to be my consultant of the day, who is an absolute hoot and makes working a joy. We had more staff than I've probably ever seen in the emergency department on that day. And everything seemed all right. The night team came to hand over and we all clustered together. And then partway through handover, the red phone rang. And I answered the red phone. And it was a red standby for a paediatric cardiac arrest. And I turned to my ST6 and I said, I'll go through to resus, I'll start setting up, I'll see you in there. And we moved through into resus, and we started to decide who was going to do what kit we needed to get out, started to prepare as you would for any other cardiac arrest. We decided that the ST6 was going to team lead, and he was going to do this with the support of the consultant who was on for the day. Anaesthetics came down, and because it was handover, we got pretty much the entire night team, as well as all of the day team that came in. So we decided that anaesthetics should do A. Paediatrics came down, and again, it's handover, so you get the night team, and then you get the day team as they start to drip in for their morning shift. There must have been 20 to 30 people who arrived for that cardiac arrest. And I, as the junior reg, was given the role of IV access. And I was assigned one of our trainee AMPs to help me. And we had a plan. And we had stickers. So we don't have stickers that we use for normal cardiac arrest, but we have trauma stickers because we are a major trauma centre. And everybody was assigned their relevant sticker. And we felt prepared. Or as prepared as you can. And then they arrived, and the child was junior school level, and they were brought in by 3 paramedics, and they were doing CPR as they came up the corridor. And the parents came in with the paramedics, but said, we can't cope with this anymore. They started CPR at home on their own child, and weren't able to stay with them when they came into resus. And that is not something that we're prepared for. Everybody tells you that the parents, you should get them to stay, it helps with bereavement. Yes, it's their choice, but expect that they will be there. Well, when we were allocating roles, we'd allocated one of our staff nurses to look after the family. But all of a sudden, we couldn't afford for our staff nurse to be in the relatives room with them because the paediatric sisters who had come down did not know where things were. And so very quickly our team dynamics had to change. And our consultant decided that he would liaise with the family because he would be able to anticipate what our next steps were, what our next moves were, and come in and out of the situation, and yet still have a reasonable idea of the bearings that he needed to keep. But that left the ST6 running the arrest. And despite the fact, he's probably one of the most competent ST6s that I have ever worked with. He was dual qualified, had already completed his training in RCM, and had 2 months to go before he was going to start his grown-up job that he'd already bagged at another hospital. And so what we did was I supported him. I still had IV access to do as my role, but when he needed to pass things through that he thought were too stupid ideas to talk to the paediatricians about, he talked to me about them. And I would give him the confidence to be able to tell somebody else that that was the plan and that's what we were doing, because we were friends. And essentially that's what friends do, they support each other. And we carried on for 40 minutes. And everything happened as you would expect to happen. They got the airway in. IV access was a little bit tricky. We put an IO in instead, and then the paediatricians spent quite a long time trying to get other IV access. So I put a central line in the femoral with a green cannula, which is something that I'd seen done once before to a child of a similar age, but we were desperate and we were trying to do everything that we possibly could to save this child's life. And after 40 minutes, we stopped. Our ST6 turned to me and said, I think we need a debrief. I thought, great, good idea, we don't do this often enough. Debrief, exactly what we need. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was me. We'll come to that in a second. I didn't really want to do this debrief. And I said to him at the time, I said, okay, so who's going to do the debrief? And he said to me, well, I don't want to do it because I feel like I need a debrief. And actually, that's something that we forget quite a lot. The team leaders do the debriefs, but the team leaders are the ones who have had that burden of making decisions. And they need a debrief probably more than anybody else in that room does. And he said to me, you do debriefs, why don't you do it? And at that point, we can move on to the next slide. And at that point, I thought, who, me? Why me? And I didn't want to do it. And actually, at that moment in time, I really wanted to murder him. Because I knew that I had absolutely no choice. There was nobody else in that room who had any experience in debriefing, and this was not going to be an easy debrief. The sorts of debriefs that I do, and the ones that I'm used to, are mainly in the sim lab, and I have groups of maybe 8 people. More than that, and sim doesn't really work too well. And this is the sort of setting. It's normally quite cosy. We often have lots of tea and coffee. Everybody chats. It's nice and friendly. People do stupid things and you laugh. It's great. And instead of that, I was faced with a group of 13 people. And we asked them, does anybody want to go home instead of having a debrief? And nobody said yes. Everybody said no, thank you very much, we'll take a debrief. So we crammed everybody together in the seminar room, and it was standing room only. And I was absolutely petrified. Probably even slightly more petrified than I was about standing here today and talking. But it was all going to be okay, because my mentor was going to be there. He was another one of the consultants, and a very established consultant, and he had known me since I was in foundation year 1. And he'd known me through all of my training. And he arrived partway through the cardiac arrest, and he was on a non-clinical day, but as you do when something terrible is going on in your department, he came into resus to see what he could do to help. And he did small tasks, like running bloods to the pod machine. But other than that, he wasn't heavily involved. And he said, I will come with you, I will stand next to you, and I will support you whilst you do this. And he did. And the debrief went okay, to start with. It's a massive group, debriefing 20 to 30 people. Normal methods of debriefing don't really work in this sort of scenario, but I teach people how to debrief. I teach people how to debrief in different settings, so I know different models of debriefing. So I just picked a different model, a model that I knew was right for this setting. And so we used the narrative mode. And we went around the room to start with, and everybody introduced who they were, what their roles were, at what point they came in. We worked through in a chronological order, and we came up with some points. The CPR was excellent. We got a tube in really early. We weren't fazed by the lack of ability to get IV access straight away. We got an IO in so we could give the treatment that we wanted to give. We didn't have stickers for the paediatricians. You cannot imagine how upset the paediatricians were that we didn't have stickers for them. And we covered all of that. And then we moved on to how people were feeling. We had 3 student nurses who were there. They'd never been involved in an arrest before at all. And they felt a bit numb. And they weren't really upset. And they weren't sure if that was okay. Because of course it's okay. How you feel is always okay. It's how you feel. It's personal to you. And then my mentor cried, which was not something that I was prepared for at all. And it felt very much like a rug had just been pulled out from underneath my feet. Because he was there to support me, that was why he'd come in. But the patient was the same age as his daughter. And as he came into work that day, he was joking with one of the other consultants about this welcome committee that was standing outside the resus bays when they came in through that entrance. And then when he walked into resus and saw what we were dealing with, it was all too real for him. And he came out with this in my debrief. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to cope with it. We don't hug. I've never hugged my mentor. I'm not a hugging person generally. One of my other consultants at work asked my permission before he gives me a hug because he knows that I'm not the hugging type. Did I hug him in front of a room full of 30 people when I had never hugged him before? It would have been the most awkward thing imaginable. And this was demonstrated by the fact that the clinical director who was standing on his other side gave him the most awkward pat on his arm that I've ever seen. And I did what I teach people to do in debriefs when something's hard. When you get that really difficult debrief, you throw it back to the rest of the group. Don't try and deal with it on your own. And that's what I did. So the rest of the group then started talking about how they felt. And we acknowledged that, yes, feeling numb is fine, but also being really upset and having that emotional connection because it feels personal, that's also fine. And then we summarised. We promised that we would order some stickers for the paediatricians. And everybody got up and left. Except me, I stayed, waiting until everybody had left. And one person stayed with me. And that was a trainee AMP that had been assigned to help me cannulate the child. And at that point, one of the firmest friendships that I've ever made was formed. And actually, we didn't say anything to each other at that point. But on the way out to the staff room, I turned to her and I said, "That is the hardest thing that I have ever done." And that was as close as I got to telling somebody how I felt. And what we did was we went and we sat in the staff room and we drank tea. And we didn't really talk. And then we clung to each other for the rest of our shift. We didn't see any patients separately. We saw all of our patients together. We were possibly the most inefficient team known to man. But what we did was we got each other through that day. And over the next coming days, I started to get some feedback on the debrief. People would come up to me and say, "I heard about that cardiac arrest the other day. I heard you did the debrief afterwards. It was amazing. We've had great feedback from anaesthetics, or 20 of them." We've had feedback from the paediatricians. The paediatric consultant wants you to know it's the best debrief she has ever been to. And everybody's really grateful. And you stand there and you take it, because you can't not, can you? And you go, oh, thanks very much for that, in that kind of awkward British way you don't really know what to say when people say well done. And you thank them for their feedback. And all the time, I was feeling terrible. Because I facilitated that debrief. But when you are a debriefer, you don't gain the benefit of that group activity. You are there to facilitate it for the other people. And I haven't dealt with any of the feelings or any of the emotions that I had at that time. And it wasn't until one of the other consultants came to me a few days later and said, "How do you at that paediatric cardiac arrest? How did you do the debrief? It was great." And I was just wondering how you are. That was the first time anybody had asked me how I felt after doing that. And we went and we sat down and we talked about it. And we talked about the paediatric cardiac arrest. It was the first paediatric cardiac arrest that I had ever been to. And really, nobody knew. Because I hadn't had any opportunity to tell anybody that actually I had never been in that sort of situation. I've never had to deal with what we were dealing with when it came through the front door. I was one of those lucky people that bad luck just avoided. I can tell you now that I'm making up for it at the moment. But we went through and we talked about what happened in the debrief, the decisions that we've made, why we've made them, about my slightly rogue central line with a green cannula. And we talked about that whilst drinking gallons of tea. But then we talked about the debrief. And we talked about why it was so hard and why it was difficult. And we talked about the fact that my mentor, my support in it, had cried and that I didn't know how to cope with that. And that it's normal to feel completely helpless when somebody that you care about greatly is hurt and you can do nothing to help them at that moment in time. Well, that's normal. But up until that point, I'd not had that discussion with anybody. Was that normal? Was that not normal? Is that something people do? My mother tells me it's something that people do every time I come out of an exam. But it's not really something that I had experienced except in family life. And what happens in debriefing, as I alluded to earlier, is when you're a debriefer, you are a facilitator. And your role is to facilitate. So what you do is you bury every single emotion that you feel as deep down as it will possibly go. Because if you feel what you actually feel, then you cannot facilitate that debrief, because it makes it about you and it is not about you. When you debrief a group, it's about them. It's about how they feel, it's about how they have coped, it's about what they want to learn from it. It's not about you as a facilitator. But in addition to that initial suppression, what you also do is you absorb the emotions and the feelings of every person in that group, because you have to deal with all of them there and then. And you just add it to the stuff that you feel already, and you bottle it all up, and you store it away. And you cannot let it affect you during your debrief, because that is not your role. Your role is about them, it is not about you. Which is fine at the time. But actually, you need to deal with it at some point. This is quite a dramatic example in many ways. It was a highly emotive case, it was a very difficult debrief. my whole world fell apart not long after this because of difficulties in being able to cope with the emotions that I was feeling from this and from other similar events at work. But actually, every time that we do a debrief, we take on board those emotions and those feelings. And it's becoming more popular now. So after cardiac arrests, even when they're quite straightforward, we're doing a debrief, we want to learn from it. It's not just critical incident debriefing, we're debriefing after challenging cases, we're debriefing when we're doing mini-kexes and CBDs with our juniors rather than giving them Pendleton's rules feedback. We're actually debriefing them instead. And what you are doing as debriefers is then you take on everything that they feel, the mistakes that other people have made, the way in which it has affected them, and you bury it all down, you just keep it all there. And at some point you will break, because that's what it does to you, to contain that wealth and that feeling of emotion. And so, what I really want to say is, please remember to debrief your debriefers, because we do a lot for other people, but we also need